Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Kunja Bihari Govijana Vallabha Jaya Girivardhari Jaya Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Jaya Girivardhari Jaya Girivardhari Yasodanandana Jaya Rajajanaranjana Jaya Rajajanaranjana Jaya Jasodanandana Jaya Brajajanaranjana Jaya Brajajanaranjana Jaya Jamunnathirvandachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Jamunnathirvandachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Jaya Girivardhari Jaya Girivardhari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Jaya Girivardhari Jaya Girivardhari Yamunnathirvannachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Jamunnathirvannachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parabhraja Gacharya Stu Thalasara Śrīmad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder-Acharya Prabhupada Ki Jai. Śrīmad Bhāgavatam Grantharaj Ki Jai. Gaura Pramanandi Haribo. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Chapter 1, text number 6. Adunneha Mahabhagha Yataiva Narakandara Nanagra Yatananneyat Tenme Vyakyatum Arhasi Adunneha Mahabhagha Yataiva Narakandara Nanogra Yatananneyat Tanme Vyakyatum Ahasi. Aduna, right now, iha, in this material world, Mahabhaga, a greatly opulent and fortunate Sukadeva Goswami, yata, so that, eva, indeed, narakan, all the hellish conditions into which the impious are put, naraha, human beings, nana, varieties of, ugra, terrible, yet none, conditions of suffering, na iyat, may not undergo, tat, that, may, to me, vyakyatum, ahasi, please describe. Translation. A greatly fortunate and opulent Sukadeva Goswami, now kindly tell me how human beings may be saved from having to enter hellish conditions in which they suffer terrible pains. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. In the 26th chapter of the 5th canto, Sukadeva Goswami has explained that people who commit sinful acts are forced to enter hellish planets and suffer. Now Maharaj Parikshit, being a devotee, is concerned with how this can be stopped. A Vaishnava is para dukkha dukhi. In other words, he has no personal troubles, but he is very unhappy to see others in trouble. Prahlad Maharaj said, "My Lord, I have no personal problems, for I have learned how to glorify your transcendental qualities and thus enter a trance of ecstasy. I do have a problem, however, for I am simply thinking of these rascals and fools who are busy with maya sukha, temporary happiness, without knowledge of devotional service unto you. This is the problem faced by a Vaishnava. Because a Vaishnava fully takes shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he personally has no problems, but because he is compassionate to the fallen, conditioned souls, he is always thinking of plans to save them from their hellish life in this body and the next." Parikshit Maharaj therefore anxiously wanted to know from Sukadeva Goswami how humanity can be saved from gliding down to hell. Sukadeva Goswami had already explained how people enter hellish life, and he could also explain how they could be saved from it. Intelligent men must take advantage of these instructions. Unfortunately, however, the entire world is lacking Krishna consciousness, and therefore people are suffering from the grossest ignorance and do not even believe in a life after this one. To convince them of the next life is very difficult because they have become almost mad in their pursuit of material enjoyment. Nevertheless, our duty, the duty of all sane men, is to save them. Maharaj Parikshit is a representative of one who can save them. So of course, very nice verse here indicating the mood of the Vaishnava, that mood of Parikshit Maharaj is very eager to try and help the conditioned souls. But also we see in the last sentence of this purport, Prabhupada says, "Nevertheless, our duty." So Prabhupada indicating, yes, I have the same mood. I'm taking this up. Like that. And he says, our duty and the duty of all sane men. Everyone should literally become Vaishnava and have that mood of compassion. So the duty of all sane men is to save them. So this is the mood of Srila Prabhupada. If it wasn't for Srila Prabhupada, of course, we'd have no real understanding of Parikshit Maharaj or Bhagavatam. We'd perhaps never heard of it. If we would have heard of the Bhagavatam, we may have heard of it in the wrong way. And you know, it's... So, you know, by Krishna's arrangement, we're very close to Prabhupada's disappearance day. And then there's this verse just a couple of days later, so to continue the same theme of glorifying Srila Prabhupada. And to make it more obvious to me, this is on the next page of the purport. This beautiful picture of Srila Prabhupada. So to jump over and not discuss Srila Prabhupada to our best ability to some degree or another, and his personifying to the greatest degree this Paradukkha Dukkhi, and how we can follow in his footsteps to do that would be an obvious choice, given all the hints that I'm getting here. So basically, as we will see in this chapter, the whole world is in ignorance. So many of them don't even believe in the next life. And they take the very suffering condition they're in now as a form of happiness. Basically, the happiness in this world is mentioned in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Happiness in this world is more a relief from suffering. When you get a little relief from suffering, that's the best you'll get for happiness in this world. So it's something. So therefore the Chaitanya Charitamrita describes that there's sometimes a punishment where they take someone, they dunk their head under the water, until they almost think they're going to die, and the pain in their lungs, and then they pull them up. And they take a big breath, and they say, now I'm happy. And then they push them back down again. So happiness in this world is like that. So a very foolish person would take that little breath in between all the punishment as happiness. The whole thing is a suffering condition. And many of them, even if they follow religious scriptures, thinking that there may be, some God, some karma in this life or the next life. So, in the Gita it describes that those who understand that we're an eternal soul, and there's a soul in every body, that's knowledge in the mode of goodness. So sattva guna is very, very rare. But in this age, mostly there may be some knowledge in the mode of passion, where people speculate in all sorts of different ways, and even speculate on what the meaning of the scriptures is. So they really don't know, they're very unsure, could be this, could be that, but they have a lot of speculative theories. And of course, a huge proportion of the world is in the mode of ignorance, where they just accept this body is everything, and there's nothing more than that, and I just live for the body just like an animal, like that. So in the civilized part of this world, mostly perhaps in passion and ignorance, and then many others are in ignorance. And therefore, as described in Bhagavad Gita, there's these things are mentioned, of course, in the Bhagavad Gita, that chapter 3, verse 26, so as not to disrupt the minds of the ignorant men attached to fruitive results. Everyone is working for some material result, material happiness, which is really mental concoction anyway. The fruitive results of prescribed duties. A learned person should not induce them to stop work. Rather, by working in the spirit of devotion, he should engage them in all sorts of activities for the gradual development of Krishna consciousness. And so we understand from Gita that all performance of sacrifices, religion, etc., are meant for understanding Krishna, who's the ultimate goal. But because the conditioned souls do not know anything beyond sense gratification, they study the Vedas to that end. But through fruitive activities and sense gratification regulated by the Vedic rituals, one is gradually elevated to Krishna consciousness. So even if people follow some sort of moral or religious type of rules and regulations to upgrade their life, to avoid acting completely in the mode of ignorance, acting like animals, so to have some sort of sense of humanity and morality and religiosity, even when they follow those scriptures, they're still doing that based around the enjoyment of the body, the enjoyment, their sense gratification in this world now and in the future. So if they go to different churches and mosques, it's because they want to enjoy now in this world, and then if they feel that yes, at the end of this life we'll go to heaven, then I want to enjoy there as well. In the same way I'm enjoying here. Like that. So, but they don't understand the nature of the soul. That the soul does not actually require any enjoyment from anything within the whole material creation. So within the entire material creation, throughout millions and billions of births, there is not one thing the soul will come across for its enjoyment that it actually requires from material existence. Whether on this earthly planet, in the animal species, or in the heavenly planets, there is nothing in that whole, through many, many millions and billions of lives, there's not one thing the soul actually requires in this material world. So, but they don't understand, because what the soul requires, the soul is has nothing to do with the body, it is not a product of the body. The soul is composed of Sat Chit Ananda. The very form of the soul is of eternality, consciousness or knowledge, and bliss, eternally. Its very, substance is bliss itself. And so it doesn't have to... But the soul expands that bliss unlimitedly by coming into contact with the Supreme Soul, who's the reservoir of all bliss. So for the soul, its eternal happy position is in the spiritual world in relationship with the Supreme Soul. But they do not know that. But this verse is describing that still, because people are interested in sense gratification, the Vedas do regulate them so they don't end up in hellish conditions. And that is a very slow process over many, many, many lifetimes, and especially in Kali Yuga, it's practically impossible to follow the rules and regulations. So therefore in this purport, if people are following a religious process properly, or moral codes, or any sort of self-sacrifice for the benefit of others, one should applaud that. One should encourage that. Even people who are in the army, sometimes they, because some people go to the army because they just want to kill people and inflict violence. But some people go into, the armed forces, because they actually firmly believe that they're actually protecting innocent people. So they're prepared to give up their life for the benefit of others. Some people, there are all sorts of charities. Some people, like to give food and so many things. They may not be giving prasadam, but it's a selfless act. So all these things lead to Krishna consciousness. That's mentioned in the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So they should be applauded. It's a gradual process. But here, at the end of this verse, Prabhupada says, although the ignorant man is not to be disturbed in his activities, a slightly developed Krishna conscious person may directly be engaged in the service of the Lord without waiting for other Vedic formulas. For this fortunate man, there is no need to follow the Vedic rituals, because by direct Krishna consciousness one can have all the results one would otherwise derive from following the prescribed duties. And so, actually, for those who want to help people in this material world, the Vedas say you can, if you know the purpose of the Vedas is to please the Supreme Lord and serve the Supreme Lord, if you do that, then all living entities and yourself are automatically benefited. So instead of trying to save, doing altruistic, philanthropic work, one should try to save the soul. And as Prabhupada gives the example, one should not, should not save the dress of a person who's drowning, but save the drowning man themselves. And therefore the process of doing that, protecting people from the material element, material nature, is described in Bhagavad Gita 3.14 that when Lord Krishna is worshipped, the demigods who are different limbs of the Lord are also automatically worshipped. Therefore there is no separate need to worship the demigods. For this reason, the devotees of the Lord who are in Krishna consciousness offer food to Krishna and then eat, a process which nourishes the body spiritually. By such action, not only are past sinful reactions in the body vanquished, but the body becomes immunized to all contamination of material nature. When there is an epidemic disease, an antiseptic vaccine protects a person from the attack of such an epidemic. Similarly, food offered to Lord Vishnu and then taken by us makes us sufficiently resistant to material affection, and one who is accustomed to this practice is called a devotee of the Lord. Therefore, a person in Krishna consciousness who eats only food offered to Krishna can counteract all reactions of past material infections which are impediments to the progress of self-realization. On the other hand, one who does not do so continues to increase the volume of sinful action, and this prepares his next body to resemble hogs and dogs, to suffer the resultant reactions of all sins. The material world is full of contamination, and one who is immunized by accepting prasadam of the Lord, food offered to Vishnu, is safe from the attack, whereas one who does not do so becomes subject to contamination. So here, and of course this is part of Parikshit Maharaj's question, and the answers that will be given by Sukadeva Goswami in this discussion, is that how do we stop, what is the easiest process for stopping the general mass of people from becoming hogs and dogs or going to the hellish planets? And the Vedas prescribed a whole range of prayaschita, or atonement. One must atone. Those processes of atonement are very, very severe, especially for people who are attached to living the good life of sense gratification, and then, then they have to, it's very hard for them to perform any sort of difficulty, and the atonements are very difficult. Apart from that, because their hearts always remain impure, as soon as they've atoned, they've confessed their sin, done some penances, some Hail Marys, again they're back into the same business. As Prabhupada said, he said of Christianity, it's a Sunday, Monday business. A Sunday you confess, you do some penances, Monday back to the same business. So, therefore, but prasadam immunizes one to the point where it frees one from sinful reactions. One doesn't have to take birth as a dog or a hog or go to the hellish planets. But it also purifies the heart to the point where one gradually is placed with some higher taste coming from the bliss of the soul, where one loses one's taste for these pale things. So that process is being recommended, something they can actually follow. Here, of course, in the previous canto, Sukadeva Goswami has described the hellish, planets. Now, not everyone goes to those hellish planets. People can become, if they're sinful, they're drinking wine, eating meat, so many things. They can take a human birth, which is a lot of suffering. They can, if they're more sinful, they may go into the animal species, sometimes for a few births. These are mentioned in some of the scriptures. I might say take 3 births, or 7, and then back to the human form. If they're very sinful, they may be cast down, as Krishna says in the Gita, in very lower species of life. When there is excess sinful activity that can't be, burned up in so many lifetimes of suffering like that, and one goes to the hellish planets. But what you do see is that people who preach religion these days do not know the easy process of counteraction by devotional service to the Supreme Lord, eating prasad, chanting His holy name, etc. They don't know that process. And they do engage people in very severe punishments and atonements for discretions on the path of spiritual life, but still, despite those very extremely harsh, even violent methods to try and get people to follow different principles, none of it works. So, for instance, in some of the, Southeast Asia, the young boys and girls, teenagers, are not allowed to associate. And if they catch them associated, they beat them. They beat them with canes, and they put them in jail and do, if you get caught, you are going to get punished badly. But despite all of that, they can't stop a young boy and a young girl as a teenager from getting together. It's not possible. No matter how they beat them, they will risk their life. They will risk a beating. They will risk going to jail, but you cannot stop them. And and they quote, the justification is, you do this, you'll go to hell. And you will suffer eternal damnation. I'm actually doing you a favour. So they're very, very harsh, but actually there is a process of let's say, removing both the sinful reactions and also removing the desire to commit sinful activities, and that process is very enjoyable, and that is called Krishna consciousness. So, and this of course is what Srila Prabhupada, therefore, the leaders of the world who want to actually help people have to be conversant with all the scriptures for moral codes and they have to be conversant with the spiritual scriptures. That's described, Prabhupada describes that 322. And this is the nature of Srila Prabhupada, that he could discuss, he would discuss with the Muslims, with the Christians, and they would begin to discuss something, they would present their philosophy, and Prabhupada would question, where is that written? Even their own philosophy. Where is that written in the Quran? That is not there. Why are you saying there? Where is that in the Bible? He knew all the scriptures. You could speak to him on any philosophy, and he would, because he understood, yes, that should be accepted, but not that. Why are you speaking this nonsense like that? So actually one has to know the Vedas and how to present, the revealed scriptures, the highest spiritual realizations and process in the face of the foolish arguments of those who are presenting religion, moral codes. One has to understand both perfectly like that in order to cut through the ignorance and the nonsense and get the real message out like that. Not that... so, therefore, in verse 22, it describes that... verse 21, the same third chapter, Yajyala charitishtra sastat tat vataro janahasaya pramanam kurute lokas tadanavatate. Whatever action a great man performs, common men follow, and whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. And he starts his purport that people in general always require a leader who can teach the public by practical behaviour. At the end of his purport, he says this: all such natural leaders have a great responsibility to their dependents. Therefore, they must be conversant with standard books of moral and spiritual codes. So, because people will present their moral codes and their books, but they should be followed where it's actually giving them some progress to the right goal. But those moral and religious codes should not be followed if they're actually misrepresenting the scriptures and blatantly encouraging sense gratification or violence and obstruction on the path of progress. So one has to be able to recognise that, like that. And one has to be able to implement that in their practical life. So, therefore, basically, as we can see here, such a person is the Vaishnava. And until a person comes in contact with a Vaishnava or a Vaishnavi, they're still, taking one birth after another, despite their moral codes, despite their religiosity and standards and what have you. They're still taking one birth after another, because all of it is not based upon the soul and the soul's eternal relationship with the Supreme Soul. And unless we come to that position, one cannot remain fixed on any path. One will always be diverted somehow to some subtle or gross material enjoyment. So one has to come in contact with the Vaishnava who is fixed in self-realization that they're an eternal spirit soul and fixed in their understanding of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, our eternal relationship with Him, and activities on the spiritual path in relation to the Lord which protect us in this world and take us back to the spiritual world. Therefore, Akrura, in his, that Akrura, all over the world people are offering prayers and chanting different, verses from the scriptures. Akrura achieved perfection by doing the same thing, offering prayers, the essence of verses, And the essence of his verses is that one has to, if one is fortunate to come in contact with a pure devotee of the Lord, that will attract the Lord's mercy, then the Lord will allow that person to associate with pure devotees and serve them, and that will allow them to attain full God realization, self-realization, and go back to Godhead, the perfection. So in one of his verses, he repeats this a couple of times, but this is Akrura, Canto 10, Chapter 40, text number 28. Being thus fallen, I am approaching your lotus feet, O Lord, Krishna, because although the impure can never attain your feet, I think it is nevertheless possible by your mercy. Only when one's material life has ceased, O lotus-naveled Lord, can one develop consciousness of you by serving your pure devotees. So, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti gives this purport to summarize the points. The process of coming in contact with the devotee, getting the Lord's mercy, serving a devotee, like that. What is that exact step-by-step process? He says, Vishwanath Chakravarti, the course says, Akrura prayed, though what I have said about myself is true, I surrender unto you. This surrender is hard to attain for the impure. So even people who follow religion, you don't see them surrendering to God. It's for so many other impure purposes related to the material world. But it is surely possible if I attain your mercy. Krishna asks, when will you get my mercy? Akrura replies, O lotus-naveled one, when one worships your pure devotees, consciousness of you develops. Krishna, when will that happen? Akrura, when a person's material life is finished. Krishna, when is one's material life finished? Akrura, when he receives your causeless mercy. So, Vishwanath Chakravarti the Core summarizes that like this. By this reasoning, first, there is the causeless mercy of the pure devotees. So the pure devotees, they know people are not going to, race to the devotee, all the people, if you walk around the street with a bag of a Gita, no one's going to stop you and say, oh, can you teach me something about the Gita? You got a Gita in your hand? Oh, can we sit for a minute and just have a chat? I've got a couple of hours to spare. I was going to work, but I'm going to just stop that. I just want to sit and... No one's going to do that. So, but somehow, if one has done some little service unknowingly to the devotees, or unwillingly, devotees go out, sell them a book, didn't really want the book, gave them some money, put it at home, sat there. But that little devotional service, purchasing one of Prabhupada's books, will give fruit that Krishna will give the mercy. That this person I will bring into the association devotee. I will give them that incentive to come into their association in a mood to hear. So he makes some arrangement. So, as you said, by this reasoning, first there is the causeless mercy of pure devotees. So it all begins with some Agyata Sikriti to the pure devotees. They are travelling all over the world. And Prabhupada travelled the world. At the age of 70 to 80, 82, I think. Travelled the world, travelled the continent 10 times in 12 years, establishing 108 temples and distributing thousands of books, prashadam, like that. Unbelievable. How many people come into contact with him in that time? Millions and millions. Still today. Still today, I quite often going to the homes of different Indian people and they tell me, I saw Prabhupada. My grandfather saw, my mother saw. And I can understand from that point that whole family is being drawn in by Krishna's mercy. Somehow. The tiniest little association. And it says, followed by the beginning of cessation of material life. So that's when our material life begins to finish. That little Agyata Sakriti. Then by serving pure devotees, one develops Krishna consciousness. So Krishna arranged that you can have the opportunity to associate in service. And he says this sequence has been previously described. So previously, in a previous chapter, Akrura offered a whole lot of prayers and he came to the same conclusion. He only ever comes to the same conclusion, which is the essence of all understanding of the scriptures. So, now, therefore, Prabhupada, Paradukha Dukhi, he knows this process. The Vaishnavas know this process. If people want to get Krishna's mercy, send the devotees out preaching, and if they can somehow or another, and devotees, they're Paradukha Dukhi. They are unhappy to see the unhappiness of others. That is the Vaishnava. And so they don't really have any problem. Prabhupada was in Vrindavan. He could chant and be in complete bliss and ecstasy, just like Prahlad Maharaj, enjoy Prashadam. He was a Brajavasi. A pure devotee of Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur. He was just going to go back to Godhead. He could sit and relish Śrīmad Bhāgavatam daily. He had nothing to worry about. But he left that position. And of course, the example is not just for the general mass of people, but the example of Srila Prabhupada was also for devotees. That we should follow in the mood of Srila Prabhupada and become Paradukha Dukhi. That's our duty. Actually, it's not so much optional, but if you're sane and you understand Srila Prabhupada and what he wants us to do, it's our duty. So, now, that mood, of course, when people do come into contact with Krishna consciousness, of course, we have a tendency sometimes to take to Krishna consciousness in the same way we take to any other religious process. That what's in it for me? That's natural. And one of the things that the devotees do is that we teach people, if you want to be really happy, just do what I'm doing and you'll be happy. So a devotee has to be happy. If devotees are in grihastha life, they have to be happy. They have to be so expert, their wife's happy, the husband's happy, the children are happy, the parents are happy, and all the neighbours are happy. And then people think, I want to be a devotee like that. Now, so here, the devotee's mood is, I'm unhappy to see the unhappiness of others. I'm not seeking my own happiness because I don't have any problems. But for the sake of pleasing Krishna, they will take the happy position. So, we were discussing in the 10th canto about Kubja, the queens of Dwarka, and the gopis of Vrindavan. Now, of course, Srila Prabhupada is following in the footsteps of the Brajavasis, the highest of which are the gopis. And that was taught by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who also exemplified Paradukha Dukhi, one whose happiness was in the happiness helping others to come to Krishna consciousness. And that is the mood. He is in the mood of Radharani, and Radharani's mood is that, she becomes happy to see others doing service. She's thinking, what am I doing for Krishna? But if this soul does some service for Krishna and Krishna becomes happy, then that is my happiness. She has that mood. So Kubja, she engaged in Krishna's service, but her mood was, I shall enjoy happiness through my service to Krishna. The emotional mood of Krishna shall enjoy was not quite developed. But the Acharyas point out that such a mood, don't follow that. It can get you into all sorts of trouble, especially on the imitating, being a lover of Krishna. It can get you in all sorts of trouble. But Kubja's position is that she would become purified and actually develop love for Krishna like that. But it's just showing that, that is the beginning process anyway. The queens of Dwarka, their love for Krishna is very elevated, that they take happiness in Krishna's happiness. But the gopis, they do not care for their own happiness. They only care for Krishna's happiness. They're prepared to go to hell, but Krishna shall be happy. And we know that there are different pastimes. But, as the Acharyas point out, if their being happy brings Krishna's happiness, then they'll take that happy position. I know. So therefore, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it describes that the devotees, they splash around in the ocean of nectar, anandam buddhivardhanam. The Sankirtan movement is an ocean of nectar. There's prashadam, there's festivals, but we're not so much interested in our own relishing of the facilities, of the prashadam, of the temple facilities, the festival facilities. But the devotees certainly want to set the example of how to enjoy such happiness. Otherwise, how do people follow? So there are many devotees who are interested in the facilities of Krishna consciousness, the byproducts, a lot of byproducts. But we want them to be attracted. That's a good thing. We want people to be attracted. The elevated devotee is not envious of another person if they see, oh, this person is very happy in their service. They want that. A neophyte devotee, they see another devotee enjoying some nice service, they're thinking, oh, how is that this person, why should they be enjoying the best flowers for making garlands? Whatever it is, why should they have that opportunity to do that service? What is their position? That neophyte mentality, and there's a competition and everything. But the elevated devotee, following the footsteps of Srila Prabhupada, following the footsteps of the Brajavasis, if they see that devotees are really happy to have some facility, some service, some position, whatever, then okay, that is wonderful. That they've taken this process, and by that process, any material things will gradually be purified like that, and gradually they will go back to Godhead And they will attract so many other people like that. But for Srila Prabhupada, he had temples all over the world, but he didn't go to a temple to enjoy himself. He went there to show us how to be blissful through the facility that Prabhupada had made for us to enjoy. Prabhupada said, if my spiritual master had asked me to go preach in the forest, I would have gone to the forest. But he didn't. He asked me to go to the west. So I went there. Prabhupada didn't go to the west or make so many temples or have, nice facility to enjoy. I don't. When the Mahaprasad comes, I will be the first in line. He would have gone to the forest. If the Guru is happy, and that is a way to somehow spread Krishna, I will do that. Anyway, so that is Paradukkha Dukhi. We follow in the footsteps of Srila Prabhupada, and in this way we can also become Paradukhi, aspiring Paradukkha Dukkis, and make then Krishna really loves that mood because it's the Brajabasi mood and the mood of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So I'll leave it there if anyone has any questions or comments. Oh, good. Hare Krishna.